Hello. So let's do a review of property ownership. This is kind of the first section on the outline of the PSI guide outline. This little handout for you. It's expected if you're doing the salesperson exam, 8% of your questions are going to be on this topic. If you're doing broker, you'll have a few more at 10%. So as a salesperson, that's probably maybe 6 test questions. And as a broker, probably 8 that you can expect just on this topic. So here's the outline. And again, this is per the PSI guide outline. I'm just going to go through exactly what's on there and just dive in a little bit deeper into some of the terminology that could be on the exam for you, but I want you to be prepared. The first one is real versus personal property. So I would definitely know terms such as fixture, which is something that is personal property that has become so attached to the property that it now legally stays and becomes a fixture. The other one I would absolutely know is a trade fixture. And a trade fixture is not for residential, not for residential. It is only for the course of doing business. So this is going to be in a commercial or a lease type setting, not in single family residential, for example. That's really important because a trade fixture, even though they're trying to trip you up and use the word fixture that I just said, becomes real property when it's so attached. This is an exception to the rule because if you're leasing a property that, for example, would need restaurant tables securely bolted into the floor so that they don't move around for whatever safety issue, and you're leasing a space for your restaurant, it's understood that you're going to take those with you when you go. Those were there just for the course of doing business. The next person that leases that property could be putting in a laundromat, not necessarily even a restaurant. So the key I want you to think of is a couple different folds. One, personal property, also known as chattel. Think children and cattle, those are yours. But personal property, a great example is an alcove in a dining room. An alcove is a little recessed area in a room that's maybe only sits back 6 to 10 inches, for example. It's just a little, again, they call it an alcove. If you've got a piece of furniture that has been specifically made for that area, the question is, does it stay or does it go? If it's in a home, I would say it's personal property unless it was attached and built in to that alcove. Otherwise, you just had someone custom make a piece of furniture for you to personally use. Okay, that doesn't mean that it stays when the property is sold. The other trick on there, though, is with an in-home gym that maybe has a balance beam or something like that that's attached to the floor. I believe a question like that on the exam is setting you up that if it's in a residential property, it stays because it's been attached to look like an in-home gym. However, if it was a commercial for the course of doing business like Chow's Gym, when he rents his space, that's going to be a trade fixture because it's for the course of doing business. So just really pay attention to whether it's residential or personal, but know the term fixture and absolutely know the term trade fixture. Next are land characteristics and legal descriptions. And legal descriptions, again, is the way that we describe property that holds up in court. So this is not the street address. Your street address is for parties, the post office, and the ambulance. And those addresses can change multiple times in the course of purchasing, especially a new construction home. So a legal description is what we really rely on a court of law. And there's 3 types. You're going to have meets and bounds, lot and block, and government survey. And I would just know the definition of all 3 of those. Meets and bounds is going to be that original 13 colonies. And they've got very unique shaped states there as well. But meets and bounds is going to use a point of beginning, POB, also known as a monument, to start the legal description, and then it's going to give an outline, detailed description until they bring you back to that original monument or point of beginning. It's probably going to use describers such as latitude and longitude, feet, directions, north, south, east, and west, and it's probably going to be pretty lengthy. Your government survey is going to kind of be the next one that it phases into. And this is where the US government started moving west and acquiring territory, and they decided to get organized. So this is where they used terms of townships and sections. So I do think it's important on the exam for you to know that a township contains 36 sections. I do think it's very important for you to know that one section equals a square mile. One section equals a square mile. And each square mile has 640 acres in it. 640 acres. And then each acre contains 43,560 square feet. 43,560 square feet. That's where I think you're probably going to be challenged on the exam. So if I were you, and you can do this with other things as well, but this is one I would for sure do just in case. When you get to the exam actual computer site, you're sat down at your little cubicle with the computer, they're going to give you a piece of scratch paper. Now you've got to turn that in at the end of the exam. It'll probably have your name and the last 4 digits of your social security. But then what I want you to do is, before you even touch the computer, with your pencil up in the corner, write 640 and 43,560. That way, if it comes up on the exam, you don't get stage fright, because I've done it. And I audit the exam every year, and every once in a while have a dink, my brain goes messy. So write that down if that helps you. But I would say that that's a very common situation needed to know. And it will come up in maybe even something like someone is building a 20,000 square foot building, and it needs to be put on a lot 3 times its size. How many acres, or how many acres do they need? So you've got it in square footage, 3 times 20,000 square feet, you need a 60,000 square feet lot. Divide that by 43,560. I think you get 1.33 or something. I have my calculator out, but that's how you would move that from square footage then to acres. Okay, very common. Then really it moves in the third phase of the lot and block method of legal descriptions. And this is what probably most of us who have been dealing with legal descriptions in our real estate careers already are probably most familiar with. And this is the art of the recorded plat map. So it fits inside of these government surveys, but is a recorded plat map that shows the exact dimensions, the curves, the setbacks, the sidewalks, utility easements, all of that are already recorded on the plat map. My guess is on the exam, you're most likely to have a test question around meets and bounds. Okay, that's my guess. Now, measuring structure, land measurement, I think I've already kind of reviewed that with you, again, knowing townships have 36 sections. Each section is 1 square mile. And again, each acre is worth 43,560. And there are 640 acres per section in that 1 square mile. Mineral, air, and water rights. This is maybe going to go a couple of different directions for you. This may be not really explained on this list. But first of all, when you buy property, you've got land, and then you've got real estate, which is land plus the human-made improvements, such as, I don't know, a house. That is real estate, okay? Then in that land, you've got air, mineral, and water rights, which means you've got surface, subsurface, and air rights that you can sell. So for example, I strike oil on my property, but I want to become a hillbilly in Beverly Hills. Remember that show? Sell your property, but of course, maintain your rights to subsurface areas because you still want your oil money coming in so you can afford your lavish livelihood and go from a black and white television show to color, right? With that, in water rights, couple things I'll have you keep in mind. There's littoral rights and there's riparian rights. And here's how I choose to remember that. Littoral rights I think of as lakes or larger. So lakes, Gulf, ocean, bay. It's going to be big areas of water. And the question that I could see popping up around this, to me, that makes sense to ask on an exam, would be about that beachfront property. So you own this gorgeous home on the beach, but you still have people walking in front of your home. How is that allowable? Well, that's because your lot line only goes to the high water mark or the high tide. So that's a great question about littoral land rights. Again, for lakes or larger, those beachfront properties. Riparian rights, I remember, is this: rivers or smaller. So now the question becomes, is that river navigatable or not? And if it's navigatable, like the mighty Mississippi, you're going to own to the banks of the river. Where if you and I are neighbors and we have a small stream that goes between us, we're probably going to own to the center of that stream for our lot line. The other one that's not on this list, but I do think that you should be privy to for the exam, is the term doctrine of prior appropriation. And this means that in some areas where water sources are scarce, you must get permission from the government, local, city, state. You must get permission from the government in order to irrigate your crops. Again, that's doctrine of prior appropriation. Okay. Our next outline is about encumbrances and their effect on property ownership. Encumbrances are things that give someone the right to the property, but they do not rise the level of ownership. Now, I hear people say, if you're studying this to become a new agent as a salesperson, I hear agents all the time say, oh, you study all this stuff for the exam and then you never ever use it again. I personally think that's a lie. I think you sell enough real estate, you'll have everything on this exam come up at some point in your career. And encumbrances is definitely one of those. Encumbrances, again, affect the title of the property. They give someone else the right to use it, but it doesn't rise the level of actual ownership. So the first one are liens. And liens are property specific. They're a specific lien to that property, such as a mortgage lien. So when you buy a house and you take out a loan in order to purchase that house, the bank will put a lien against your property. And that is a written, you'll sign a mortgage that says exactly how and when you'll repay that, how much you'll pay every month, at what interest rate, annual percentage rate, all those details will be in that mortgage. It's the idea of, pay, stay. So you don't make your mortgage payment, they're going to take your property back from you. But they put a lien against your property to secure it, that you will pay that debt. Another very common type of lien that is specific to property is a mechanic's lien. So for example, I put a new roof on my property. I don't pay the contractor. They're going to put a lien against my property in order to recover that debt, which means I can't sell my property without satisfying that situation, okay? Now, this is important for the exam, and it might come up again on our list. So if you hear me say this more than once in these training videos, that's okay, because I think that this could be a very common scenario for you on an exam. And that is, which of the following do not rise to the level of an encumbrance. And it's going to be something like a mortgage lien, a mechanic's lien, a special assessment, or a property tax lien. And then the last option, the fourth option might be a judgment. And a judgment is a lien, but it is general just to you as a person. It's something that you had to go to court to settle, such as you didn't pay your credit card, or maybe something in a divorce decree. It's not specific to the fact that you own 123 Main Street. So a judgment does not rise to the level of an encumbrance because it is a general lien. Encumbrances are specific liens that are attached to that address, okay? Easements and licenses, there are several different types of easements, but an easement is where we allow someone else use of our property, a controlled area, but again, they don't have ownership. So it could be a driveway that I allow my neighbor to use, maybe the first 10 feet of it, so they can hop over onto their own driveway and access their property. And maybe we need to set that up because of a ravine or because of a bundle of trees that we don't want to take down or something like that. That's an easement appurtenance. Another really common type of lien that you'll possibly see on the exam, but for your career, is a easement for in gross, which is for utilities. So that could maybe be a situation where you got a buyer who can't fence all the way to the property line. They can only fence up to where the easement starts because we've got to let the city water come in and check out, clean out, or something like that for two properties that may be back to each other. But that's access and use of someone else's property, a controlled amount, but again, it doesn't rise to the level of actual ownership. Encroachments, this is going to be when someone else's property creeps over onto yours. So we maybe have a fence that was put up. What we thought was maybe on the lot line or on the neighbor's side, they accidentally, maybe purposely, but they accidentally, will go with the positive, put it onto your lot line. This is an encroachment, meaning someone else's property has creeped over onto yours. Now, the fourth type of encumbrance is a deed restriction. These are going to be like those CC&Rs that you studied, covenants, restrictions. Those happen a lot with developments and homeowners associations, but they stay with the property. So that encumbrance of a deed restriction does not, and any of these encumbrances do not need to be renegotiated every time you sell the property. They stay with it unless it's abandoned or agreed that it's no longer necessary. Those are usually the two reasons. Maybe one person buys the neighboring property, so now that they own both, they don't need an easement. But these deed restrictions stay. Sometimes they've got an expiration date on them, but usually they stay forever, and they go with the title transfer every time a new owner takes on a property. Deed restrictions are going to be things that maybe regulate how the property is used. And really commonly, a developer will put together deed restrictions that outline what the properties should be built as. And they do this to maintain conformity in the neighborhood. That way we don't have this huge mini mansion built and then someone come in with their tiny home and ruin their value. So a developer will maybe have some basic deed restrictions that say a minimum square footage of 1,400 square feet. Once you dig and pour the basement, the rest of the property must be completed within 6 months. If you're going to plant trees, it's got to be of a certain family. They're probably trying to avoid ash trees right now because those are getting very damaged in eastern Iowa and moving west, becoming hauled out. It's all things like that. There are more about architectural standards and design. They are not about safety. For the most part, they're not about safety. Safety, such as having 2x4s every so many inches, or support beams under your floors every so many inches. Those are building codes, and those are actually governed by your local government. Usually your city government has building codes. Those are for safety. These are really for design, and keep in mind, those are governed by either the developer or the homeowners association. So if you're building in a development that has these deed restrictions and someone's building something that's steel and glass and it should be stone and stucco, it's the homeowners association's responsibility to correct that situation, probably by taking them to court, okay? You're not gonna call the city and complain. That's for building codes, okay? We'll probably talk about that one again, but I do know it's something that has come up, and it can be a little confusing. So if we repeat it more than once, it's probably because it's important, okay? The next one, and this is the last category, is types of ownership. And I absolutely think that you will have a question around joint tenancy and tenants in common. So tenants in common is when we own a percentage of the property. Joint tenancy is unique in that it has the right of survivorship, which means if I and another person own a property and one of us passes away, the other one has the right of survivorship to now own it in severalty. We're a single owner now. That's what severalty means. We're a single owner. So the right of survivorship with joint tenancy just basically means there's one less owner. So couple test questions that I think could be helpful is, which of the following has the distinguishing feature of right of survivorship? Joint tenancy. Okay. The other one might be, which of the following would allow a widowing spouse to avoid probate and stay in the home when her spouse dies? Again, right of survivorship. A great answer for that would be joint tenancy. Tenants in common, when it is sold, first of all, you can sell your percentage. Not necessarily do you have to have permission of the others unless you're married. But when you die, let's say I own a property as a tenant in common with 3 others. When I pass, I can either will it to the other 2, or I can choose to will it to whomever I want. There's no automatic that the other 2 investors own this with me. So I think you want to study joint tenancy to really navigate. Knowing tenants in common is going to really affirm what you know. But I think test questions around joint tenancy are going to be important because they're just so common in Iowa and real estate. Common ownership is going to be timeshares, condos, and co-ops or cooperatives. And these 3 like to run together on the exam test. And even on your practice exams that you might be finding online or any sources that maybe you've gotten from me. Those 3 run together as an A, B, C option, and then D will be something random. A condominium is where you buy a property, you own basically your unit in, your walls in, plus shared areas such as hallways, parking lots, green space, and then you're all contributing to the overall insurance and care of the exterior maintenance, roof, and maybe any other groundskeeping such as lawn care or snow removal. Okay, but you own your unit with a traditional deed, basically walls in. A condo is, or excuse me, a co-op is very similar to that, except the difference is you don't have a traditional deed. You've got some sort of proprietary lease. And the way a co-op works is you own stock in a corporation. The corporation owns the building. You buy stock in that corporation, and in exchange, you've got your unit. Okay. The third one is a timeshare, which I can hear you all rolling your eyes. Timeshares can get a bad reputation. Timeshares is when you own the rights to a property for a certain week, for example, and that week only. So you maybe have a timeshare in Fort Lauderdale, Florida for spring break every year, and it's always the second full week in March. You don't decide to go down any other time. That is your week of ownership. Okay. Now we've talked about ownership and severalty. That is single ownership by one person. And that one might be important for you to know, because if we've got tenants in common with 4 people and one passes, now we've got 3. And then one of them passes, and now we've got 2 owners. And then one of them passes, there's only 1 owner left. That's the type of ownership they're now going to have. Okay. A life estate, there's really 2 major types of estate, fee simple and a life estate. And your fee simple is going to be your highest form of an estate. You can will it, gift it, transfer it, and sell it however you wish. You got full control of that property. A life estate is a little bit different because you don't have full control. You're owning it for the life of another. So you don't have the right to will it, gift it, sell it. The condition of someone's will have said, you can stay here in this property during your lifetime. But once that's done, my niece now becomes the owner. So someone's controlling it beyond your ownership. Look for the words "for the life of another." That's a good tip. Also under life estates, I think that there's a couple good terms for you. One is a homestead. And a homestead is what protects the property you live in, not your investment properties, but the property that you live in from most creditors. Now, the reason it says most creditors is because if you've been using a mortgage as a way to buy it, again, you're going to have that no pay, no stay policy. What this is saying, though, is let's say I abandon paying my Chase Visa. And we go to court and we settle a $20,000 judgment against me to repay. It's saying that Chase can't take my $200,000 home that I live in to secure that debt. That would be misbalanced, correct? Another good term under that life estate is they talk about, I believe it's courtesy is the one word, and dower rights. And those are kind of used interchangeably. One is supposed to be when the husband or male dies, and the other one when the wife dies first. In Iowa, we just use the term dower rights. And what that means is, as a married couple, while it might only take one of you to purchase the property, it takes both of you to sell it. Which means if I buy a property in severalty and then I get married and I go to sell that property, my new spouse now has dower rights and will be expected to sign off on the deed. Okay. Then for you, broker only, this is not for salespeople, so you can close your ears for a moment. For brokers, you're going to possibly have a question about a property held in trust. And a trust is a device that can be set up maybe during someone's lifetime to manage personal and real property. It is managed by a trustee or a third party, and that is done for the benefit of someone known as a beneficiary. So have you ever heard of the term trust fund baby? This is where we put together a trust device. Maybe we stock it with $20 million. We have someone manage that $20 million and basically give that beneficiary an allowance every week, month, quarter, year, however the trust is set up. And that is done so that that beneficiary doesn't just go out and buy 6 yachts and blow through their money. So it's a way of managing an estate. Again, someone manages it for a trustee for this beneficiary, which is a third party. Again, it can be done for real or personal property. Okay, that is our list for property ownership. Up next is land use controls.